On Thursday, General Motors CEO Mary Barra held a 15-minute news conference in which she discussed GM's agreement to pay $900 million to end a U.S. criminal ignition switch probe.
We let those customers down in that situation. We didn't do our job. And as part of our apology to the victims, we promised to take responsibility for our actions. So we accept the penalties being announced today, because that's what it means to be held accountable. But apologies and accountability won't count for much if we don't change our behavior. But we can be proud that we have.
That's General Motors CEO. And I want to turn to Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader, your response to the settlement.
Well, it's an absurd settlement. It doesn't deter future behavior by General Motors. Nobody went to jail. Nobody's indicted. The company wasn't indicted. The Justice Department, under Attorney General Loretta Lynch and the Obama administration, have created a new doctrine. It's called crimes without criminals. They charged GM with a crime, but the company was not indicted, and no officials were indicted. Imagine individuals being able to get away from that. That's a double standard between the privileges and immunities that are dedicated to corporations by the U.S. government and the way individuals are treated. It went so far, Amy, that there are motorists who were charged with vehicular manslaughter because they were involved in crashes due to GM's defect. As the corporate crime reporter pointed out, GM did the crime. The drivers do the time. And so I think the focus has got to be on Congress. The pending highway bill has to include criminal penalties for auto companies for violating safety standards for cars and parts if they do so willfully, knowingly. So as Rena Steinzer has said, they can be prosecuted and sent to jail.
Let me ask you about the Times piece today points out that the U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara cited an internal investigation conducted for GM as favorable in determining the penalties paid by the automaker. The two law firms hired for that inquiry, King & Spalding and Jenner & Block, had previously done legal work for GM, and court papers show Anton Valukas, the chair of Jenner & Block, who headed the GM investigation, helped represent the automaker in its talks with the Justice Department. Your response?
Well, as Professor of Law Rhodes from Stanford said, this is a strange situation where GM takes on an independent reviewer, Mr. Valukas. He puts out a report. It's quite condemnatory of GM's corporate culture over the years. And then he gets hired as the defense counsel against the Justice Department. That does not pass the smell test. There's a lot involved here, Amy. The U.S. taxpayer bailed out GM $50 billion after they collapsed in 2009 or so. And the government, in return for the bailout, became a 60% plus shareholder. So the U.S. government owned, in effect, GM. And what did they do for 5 years under the Obama administration? When they owned GM, they did not restructure GM, requiring compliance officers, requiring independent ombudsmen so conscientious engineers in GM could go and tell the ombudsman about defects in cars without losing their job. They didn't do anything except bail out General Motors. And so they lost a great opportunity to also investigate this ignition switch. I mean, it was not a secret. GM has covered up this ignition switch problem, which killed at least over 124 people, since 2002. I mean, you have the classic conditions for criminal behavior. You have a known defect by people inside GM. You have deaths and injuries increasing. You have a cover-up. You don't tell the U.S. government, the Auto Safety Agency, in 5 days what you're supposed to tell them. That's another violation of the law. It was a cop-out by the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York under orders from the Justice Department and probably the White House. It was a cop-out. It's easy to go after people for insider trading, as this U.S. attorney does. But when it comes to really going down and enforcing the law against corporate crime, he backed down. And then he gives the excuse, says, well, you know, GM has this complex internal structure. We couldn't find out who was accountable. Nonsense. As Professor Steinzer has pointed out, they've done exactly this in other cases, but it was small fry. They went after some food company that contaminated people with deaths, and now they want to sentence the head executive of this small company to jail. But no, GM, bailed out by the U.S., subjected to all kinds of stagnant technology for 50 years, suppressing known safety defects, losing market share to foreign importers, and lobbying on Capitol Hill against criminal penalties, against fuel efficiency, while it was being bailed out, and then stonewalling the same auto safety agency under the same U.S. government that's trying to enforce the auto safety laws.
On Thursday, U.S. Attorney Preet praised GM for its cooperation with authorities.
From the moment that top management came forward to disclose the defect in February of 2014, the company's cooperation and remediation have been fairly extraordinary. It conducted a swift and robust internal investigation. That doesn't always happen, I can tell you. It gave the prosecutors in my office real-time updates about the findings of that internal investigation, often revealing to the office what witnesses had said even before GM management was filled in itself.
And that's the U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. As the New York Times points out, prosecutors focused their attention on a relatively short period of time, only 20 months from the spring of 2012 to February 2014, when GM began recalling 2.6 million older cars to fix the switch. But the complaints go back more than a decade, with a number of people inside the company saying that they were being told that they shouldn't raise this issue, Ralph.
That's right. It's a classic cover-up over a period of more than a decade, as the Center for Auto Safety has pointed out. But now, looking forward, what we have to do is focus on Congressman Fred Upton, the chair of the committee in the House, handling the highway bill as we speak, and Senator John Thune from South Dakota, the chair in the Senate, and push what Senator Richard Blumenthal and Senator Ed Markey and others have been saying, put criminal penalties in that auto safety law after some 50 years of stonewalling and lobbying by GM. Otherwise, more people are going to die, more people are going to be injured. We'll have a two-tier legal system maturing, and there'll be a double standard against what people can't do and what corporations get away with. This is what has to be a major issue in the presidential campaign, if they can ever get around to serious issues. Has to be a major issue. The corporate crime wave washing over the country, and homicidal fugitives from justice like General Motors getting away with it again and again, in spite of terrific media coverage, again and again, by the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Didn't make any difference to the U.S. Attorney or the Attorney General or the White House.
Who gets the money?
The government gets the $900 million, which is like a drop in the bucket for GM. By the way, that money really is tax money recycled. GM from the bailout still has billions of dollars of taxpayer money in its treasury. There are tort lawsuits being filed and negotiations going on as we speak. At least 1,300 or so cases, next of kin claiming compensation for their loved ones and injuries. That's not fully disclosed yet as to what's happening, but it looks like it's imminent. So we have the tort civil justice system coming at GM. They'll all write it off. GM will write it off. And the surrender by the Justice Department.
Now, the U.S. Attorney does say that individual prosecutions could take place. This isn't over.
Well, let's put him on the hot seat and see if he and other U.S. attorneys will do so. They often dangle that when they know they've caved to corporate power. They dangle the prospect of future prosecutions. But Professor Steinzer can explain that's largely public relations.
Well, we're going to come back to this discussion. Our guests are Ralph Nader, longtime consumer advocate, took on GM a long time ago and has for 50 years. In fact, GM was forced to settle with him when it came out that they were spying on him as he was taking on the auto giant. Laura Christian, also our guest, mother of Amber Rose, who died in a car crash in 2005 as a result of the faulty ignition switch. And we will be speaking with Rena Steinzor, who wrote Why Not Jail? Industrial Catastrophes, Corporate Malfeasance, and Government Inaction. This is Democracy Now!, back in a moment.